Well, hello and welcome. It's great to be back again. My name is Guy Stevens. I'm the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. And you're here with us for the End Seclusion podcast, the AASR Live. We're really excited to have you here today. As always, we have a great guest in store, and I think a good opportunity to learn, hear other experiences and perspectives, and really think about what we can do to make schools safer for the kids, teachers, and staff. Of course, if you're familiar with the Alliance, our mission is really about connecting people together, changing laws and policies, trying to reduce punitive approaches and support teachers and students and staff in ways that are really better and better able to support people. So today I'm really excited to have James Moffett joining us for a special interview. James was actually a opening keynote guest for us recently at an event we did with the Attachment and Trauma Network. I had met James previously, but this was a great opportunity to hear James and hear James speak. So really excited to have him here today. James is really a leader kind of in the trauma-informed education space. You're going to have an opportunity throughout the interview. So this will be a live interview. You can ask questions and we will pass those on and ask James your questions. And so anytime you have a question, feel free to ask. As always, I'll remind you that the session is being recorded. So it'll be available to listen to later. So if you begin the event and you have to, for some reason, drop off, you can come back and watch the video on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. We also make it available as an audio podcast, so you have that option as well. So with all that said, let me get to the exciting part, which was not the introduction, but let me go ahead and introduce you all to James Moffett. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background here. James is an elementary school principal who has created, implemented, and helped others create and implement trauma-informed practices in their schools. Throughout his career, he's taught various demographic groups, observing the difference and similarities in effective instructional and behavioral strategies. Ultimately, James realized that what we all know, meaningful relationships enhance behavior and academic success. Couldn't agree more. I often say that the 3 R's of education are relationship, relationship, relationship. I think James will probably agree with that. He often threw around, the words grit and perseverance. But after viewing the film Paper Tigers, and you might remember we had Jim Sportleader on recently as well, this came full circle. James started his trauma-informed work as the principal of Derby Hills Elementary School in Derby, Kansas, which became a fully functioning trauma-informed school. And I'm excited to hear about that journey. During his time at Derby Hills Elementary, he implemented a number of different SEL and trauma-informed practices, such as safe spots, mindfulness, self-regulation, and teaching explicit SEL curriculum. James is serving as a principal now, Ferris Elementary in Hutchinson, Kansas, where he's already put his trauma-informed practices into place to better serve the needs of the students. And I know that James also speaks at a lot of conferences and events, like the recent one he spoke with at us, and I think does some consulting as well. So, James, we're really excited to have you here. I'm even more excited having just spent some time with you last week and gotten to hear your message and your presentation. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's an honor. It's a privilege. Sometimes when you hear your bio, it gets really uncomfortable. You're like, man, but I'm excited just to chat with you and just, I'm all about like just the practical work. And when people ask me like, what do you want to talk about? Like, I want to talk about what do we do with this work? We can get into the neuroscience, we can get into the brain and all that stuff. And that stuff does fascinate me. But I also want to help people just know what can I do with that knowledge base that we have. So
absolutely, and that's really important. I know you know a little bit about who we are with the Alliance, but part of what we're really trying to do is promote what are the better ways. How do we better support the kids, the teachers, and the staff? And it's journeys like yours that I think are so important to amplify. So people are often kind of stuck, like, it's not working, we're having these problems, what do we do differently? So I think that practical experience is so critical. We have kind of as part of our community, we have a lot of parents, we have a lot of self-advocates, autistic self-advocates. We have a tremendous number of teachers, administrators, related professionals, people that are on this journey. And I know you speak at trauma-informed educators events and things like that, but people that are on this journey. And my hope in this interview today is to share who you are, what you've done, and all those great things. So let me begin with a couple questions. But before I do, I just want to take a second and say, if you're watching live, let us know who you are, where you're from. I guess you get bonus points today if you're from Kansas, but we'd like to know if you're from anywhere around the world. And James, I will tell you, interestingly enough, we get a lot of people from across the world. We get people from New Zealand and Australia and the UK. So we tend to get a pretty broad audience. So I'll be curious to see who pops on and tells us where they're from. So let's start off. I don't want to say in the beginning, but
Yeah, yeah.
let's go back a little bit in time here. Um, One, how did you kind of get pointed in the direction of education to start with?
I've just always know I wanted to be a teacher. Like that's the crazy part. I don't have like a real like fairy tale story where I ended up on this platform. Like I can remember back as far back as maybe second or third grade, and just knew that I had some awesome teachers, some that I really connected with, and I enjoyed that relationship. The work looked fun to me, and so I made a decision very early on that I wanted to be a teacher someday. And I think probably around fifth or sixth grade, I was like, I want to be a principal one day too. And after that, I was like, if I'm going to be a principal, I want to be a superintendent. So the joke, like I was overzealous probably, and maybe it'll come true. I don't know. But like the joke for me was always I wanted to do this 10-10-10 plan. I want to be a principal or a teacher for 10 years, a principal for 10 years, and a superintendent for 10 years. So far, so good. I taught for 10 years, and then I became a principal. I'm in year 8 as a principal, and we'll see what happens next. But I do know that like my dad is a university professor. He's in education. My grandparents were both in education, so maybe that's some of it. Just that
Mhm.
connection and just maybe family tradition, history. I don't know what it was, but I knew early on I wanted to be a teacher.
So just a couple more years before you get to the next step of that. And have you ever thought about moving to Maryland? I mean, we could use some really great superintendents over here. So,
Yeah,
I'll just put that out there. I mean, yeah,
good.
I met with our new superintendent in our district recently, which was a great meeting, and comes in, with I think a lot of really great ideas. But
Good.
I'm sure that there are a lot of places that would love to have somebody with your background. And I can, I kind of think about the difference a teacher can make, and you think about the difference a principal can make, and then
Yeah.
you keep going up, and I mean, the difference is the same in a way, but the reach becomes greater, and going up to that next level up as a superintendent, the ability to influence an entire district is really something I imagine is really exciting for
It
you.
is. I think for me, just the transition from teacher to principal was exciting because one, I was super fearful that I would miss connection with kids. And I think
Mhm.
that hasn't happened at all. I think I pride myself in getting into every single classroom every single day, interacting with kids as much as possible. I've taught tier groups, I go do read alouds, all those things. And so I don't miss that. But it's really interesting for me. I was very naive, I think, as a teacher, as to what was happening in everybody else's classroom. Because as teachers, we generally focus on these are my four walls and I'm in this area, this is my domain, and you just assume that there's great things happening in every room, and there truly are. But I think when you take that next step to the principalship, what I always compare it to is if I could just take the lid of a school and just peel it back, and now I'm able to look at 35 different rooms and have influence over what's happening in all those rooms, but still have relationships with all those kids and relationships with all those teachers. It's been unique. And so I think I'm at that point now where I'm fearful about the superintendency because I'm afraid of a lack of connection with kids. But I think, what helps me is knowing that the fear that I had in this transition and being able to make that happen, I would hope that I could make it happen even in that role as well.
Absolutely. I think there's probably great opportunity there. So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned kind of teachers that had a positive influence, and you have family that has come from education.
Yeah.
Can you think of a particular teacher that really kind of influenced you in terms of, you mentioned the relationship,
Yeah.
and I think back, and somebody asked me this question recently, think of a teacher, and I thought back, and I went all the way back to second grade to think of a teacher named Mr. Miller. And no idea where Mr. Miller is today, but I remember how kind he was, and I remember how I really felt connected, and that made a difference. And I can think back to other teachers. The teacher I had the year before who
Yeah.
did not meet that same that same effect. But is there somebody that you can think back to that was
Oh man,
really
there's probably a couple, and I think my situation's kind of unique because I went back and I taught at the school that I went to as a kid,
okay?
and so I have a lot of those relationships still with those people that were my teachers and then my colleagues. And so I think back to Miss Williams was my second and third grade teacher. She looped up with us, and I actually went back and student taught with her. And I have some vivid memories. A joke that I tell all the time. It's more of a funny story. Was I remember borrowing a book from her in the second grade, and it
Mhm.
was a book called the Little Bunny or something like that, the Little Rabbit, and I misplaced it at home for 2 years. And then I remember when I went back to student teach with her years later, I took the book back because I still had it at home and her name was still written in the book. So it's kind of crazy. But then like, so she was definitely influential for me. Mrs. Briles was influential. I tell a story about her all the time, but I will say somebody else that comes to mind was, well, Mr. Rivera, but Mr. Davis. And I think, sometimes it's so important we talk about this, but like, I love telling the story about how it's important that our teachers represent our clientele. Our teachers look like our kids
Mhm,
sometimes. So
mhm,
for me, when I was in the sixth grade, I had Mr. Davis was the first and only African American male teacher that I
mhm,
ever
mhm,
had.
mhm,
And he was my sixth grade math teacher. And he was hard on me, but he loved me unconditionally. I remember going back as a junior and studying with him for my PSAT and my SATs and things like that. So there was definitely an impact that he had. And just, I think also all too often we think about like you can accomplish anything, right? But I think there is something in tangibly seeing somebody who looks like you
sure.
accomplish something because it makes it seem like it's not just a dream, like it's
Right.
really something that has the potential to happen in reality. So
Mhm.
those are people that come to mind right away that were really influential for me.
And there's still a lot of work to be done in that area. I mean, what do we do to really increase representation so we have, more teachers that look like students and that relate to students? Do you have thoughts on, how we continue to make that shift?
I think that's why I think I have such a focus on relationships because I know
Mm,
for me it was the relationships I had with teachers
right.
led me to want to do the work that they were doing, right? And so if we can have better relationships with the students we work with now, I know they're more likely to want to emulate us and see the impact and the work that we're doing and maybe follow in our footsteps as well.
Mhm.
So
So
I think
so
that goes a long way.
yeah, and you taught for 10 years, right?
Yeah, I did.
And now you've been a principal for 8 years.
Correct.
So are there students that you've had, and you don't have to say their names, but are there students that you have that have kind of followed these paths or followed like paths and, anybody like you that came back to the school where they went or
I have a couple. So one of them is kind of funny because I get to go out and present quite a bit, and I have this connection with Emporia State here in Kansas, where I do
Mm,
a lot of work with their pre-service teachers, and I did a Zoom call with them earlier this week, and I have another one coming up next week. And so they actually have this trauma informed, which this is so impressive. I don't know, there's probably other colleges that do, but this is the one that I know about. A college that has a trauma informed club for educators.
mhm,
And they host a conference. They've actually brought Jim Spoiler in for their conference. Ruby Payne's come in for their conference. I've been able to speak at their conference, so I'm really excited about the work they're doing because I do feel like there's a lack of this type of work with our pre-service teachers. But anyway, I did this podcast with them, and maybe like 2 weeks later, a former student shared it on Facebook, and she tagged me, and I was like, "Well, how did you see this?" Well, it turns out she's in the education program, and I definitely can't take credit for her taking the route that she did, but I hope I had a little bit of influence. But it was so cool to see that you never know. We talked about that adage of you never know when your impact's going to end, right? It goes on and on forever as a
right.
teacher. And so it was so cool to see her share the podcast that I was on, but also to believe in the work that I was talking about. That was
Mhm,
really awesome
mhm.
for me.
That's amazing. So, tell me a little bit about kind of your early teaching career. So you mentioned, kind of in your bio, we talk about how, at one point you were kind of it's about grit, it's about perseverance,
Yeah.
and then you get into your trauma informed journey. But what was it like early on? And we'll get to eventually kind of where you had that spark in the trauma
Yeah.
informed direction. But tell me a little bit about your journey early on.
Yeah, early on, I've always believed in the power of relationships. That's always been something like I feel like I'm fairly good at, obviously, like connecting with kids and being vulnerable with kids and trying to tie in their story to my story and get them to see the potential that they have. But I was also very authoritative. I was also very, I think, we get into teaching or we become parents that were like the parents we had and the teachers we had.
Mhm,
And so my educational career, like it was very fear and compliance based as a student for me. And so as I get into the teacher role, like I follow those footsteps. It was very fear and compliance based. And so
mhm,
I think I was very harsh as a teacher at first. I will say that I think I also was really good at with the restorative conversations where I could be harsh and have the restorative conversations. I think as I grew and as I became more invested in work, and I always point back to 2015 was like the turning point for me. So I started teaching in 2004. 2015, and I was actually into my principalship at this point, was the turning point when I saw Paper Tigers And I remember just being in awe of there's a different way. So it kind of ties back to what I said earlier. Sometimes you have to see that there's a different way. I think we can believe it. I think we can think about the potential of it or the possibility of it. But I think sometimes we have to see that there's a different way. And so when I saw paper tigers, like I visually saw with my eyes, there's a different way to do this work. And it doesn't have to be fear and compliance based. It can be love and compassion based, right? And so I was at this conference in Manhattan, Kansas, a couple hours from here. I mean, I went to this conference as a first year principal, just excited to go to a conference and get out of my building for a couple of days. And here I am. I stumble into the screening of Paper Tigers. I said, "What's this about?" And I remember just being mesmerized by the work. And I was with a colleague, and she and I were both like, "Wow, there's a different way to do this work." And so I went back to my hotel room that night. I actually found Jim on Twitter, sent him a message and says, "Hey, like I just watched Paper Tigers. I'm at this conference where you're at. You just did a Q&A session. I'm just amazed by this work. I want to know more about this work." And so to me, he's this big celebrity at that point, and now he still is, but he's become a really good friend as well. And so I never imagined that he would write me back. And he wrote me back. And not only did he write me back, we exchanged messages back and forth for a little bit. Then he just gave me his phone number and says, "Call me." And so it was like, oh my God, like I'm this first or second year principal. I'm calling this guy who I still, an endearment term that I have for him is he's the godfather of trauma informed care. That's what I always call him. And so as I called him and we just started talking back and forth, and as a staff, we were reading Help for Billy. That was kind of the first thing that came across my path, that this is a work that you need to read with your staff. So we read that as a staff. And at the time, he was in the middle of working and writing the trauma informed implementation guide. And it hadn't been published yet. And so what he began to do is he began to give me like PowerPoint after PowerPoint. Try this training with your staff. Try this training with your staff. So I like to think like our school was kind of like his guinea pig, but at the same time, we were really lucky to go through that work with him. And that's kind of how we started on this path was before. And I tell people often, you think back to 2014, 15, trauma-informed work wasn't as popular as it is now, right? It wasn't that buzzword that it is now. And so it was about like, we had to build the plane as the plane was flying type of thing. I didn't have, somebody to call in and say, "Hey, do this PD with my staff." I didn't have lots of materials and books to read. It was like creating it as we were going along and offering it to staff and watching them grow and watching them understand as well. And so it turned into a really organic, incredible experience. And like I think back to what we created, and it was more them than me, but what they created as a staff and just the environment that they created. And I remember the day that Jim was in town for a conference and he actually came to our school. And to this day, that's probably the biggest compliment I've ever gotten from anybody, is when he walked in and his only words were, "This place feels different." And before he even saw, he was just watching interactions with adults and kids, and he just said, "This place feels different." And I think it's a tangible feeling that you can feel. So that's kind of the transition that I went to from fear and compliance to love and compassion. And
I love that. And it fits in so well with that event that we did recently, which was kind of from compliance to compassion, right?
Yeah.
And of course, Jim spoke at that event as well. And we had actually interviewed Jim a couple weeks ago also. I agree with you. Kind of rock star, right? Rock star in all of his work. But the amazing thing is there's so many people out there doing this incredible work that are kind, that are sharing, that really genuinely want to see a positive difference for kids and for teachers and for others. And I love that story. I'm just going to share a couple of quick things here real quick. We have people that have joined us. Sandy, who was actually leading a breakout session at the event, said, "Loved your keynote." And I know where that word "loved" comes from here. We have Marissa here from Texas stepping in, and we've got Chantel, who's from New Brunswick, Canada. Although last time I heard she was in South Carolina, so I'm not sure if that's true. Anybody else, if you're on there watching live, tell us who you are and where you're from. Let me take you back for a second before we continue on in your kind of your transition and your growth and all of that. I want to set the stage a little bit. When you opened the conference recently and you began to speak, you started in a place that really was near and dear to my heart, which is you kind of gave the introduction that I used to give a lot, which is like, I'm a dad, and being a dad, is such an important part of, I think of our journeys, and I think many others. But I remember you talking about being a dad, and kind of your path, as far as being a dad and how that related to kind of where you are. I wonder if you can share a little bit about that, because one of the things that I've found in this work that I've been doing. So it's been almost 4 years now that I started doing this kind of work, and it was kind of a big change for me, and it happened really because of what had happened to my son. Um, but that it's been really important to me to do this. But one of the things that I find is that there's not as many dads out there sometimes doing the work that needs to be done, whether it be advocating for their kids in IEP meetings or doing other things. So whenever I find another dad that is has their heart in this place and has their heart in this work, it really touches me. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about kind of your father background and story as well.
Yeah, so you're right. I like to share that first. And I think oftentimes in the work that we do, because we're so busy and because we're so task oriented, it's easy to forget that who we are at our core. And so I am a dad first, and I will be honest and say that I wasn't always a dad first. I think it's easy to think that as a father, I'm just here to provide, and providing just means like I'm doing what I need to be financially stable. I'm doing what I need to provide financially for my kids and for my family. And I can admit that when I made that transition to from teacher to principal, that was hard. And I was easily working like 70 to 80 hours a week,
Mm,
because you're gifted with this opportunity, like you said, to influence such a wide range. Your influence has such a reach. And I wanted to do it right. And so one of the things that I'm not happy to share, one of the things that I can admit, was I wasn't as good of a dad then as I should have been. And I feel like I'm not in a place of trying to correct that. I'm in a place of trying to be more present and just do a better job, right? And so I think as I went through this work, what I had to really understand was the work that we do in terms of being trauma informed, trauma responsive, restorative, loving, compassionate, all that work, that should never just apply to the students that we work with, right? At
mhm,
some point, that has to apply to my personal life and the kids that I work with too. And my kids at home, and Aria and Ayana, who I have at home, and in the relationships that I have to do a better job of being loving and compassionate with them as well. And I often talk about how we had created this incredible, truly trauma informed, all encompassing, full on, fully functioning school. And I remember the day, like there's certain things that are etched in your mind. And I remember the day I pulled into my parking lot at school, ready to start another day with 604 kids that we had at the time. And I remember like just reflecting, and I don't know what it was that brought that to like a boiling point, but I remember pulling in and saying, I feel like such a hypocrite. I feel like
mm,
I come here every single day and I'm all about this love and compassion and restorative conversations and these trauma informed practices. But then I go home and I revert back to these very fear based, fear and
mm,
compliance
mm,
based
mhm, mhm,
methods, because that's what I knew as a kid and that's how I was raised. And I had to make a decision. And I had to decide, like, if I'm truly saying that I feel like this is the better way, if I truly feel like with other people's kids that I have to move from fear and compliance to love and compassion, I'm a hypocrite if I don't believe that about my own kids.
mm,
And
mhm, mm,
so that was like a slap in the face of like, man, I need to be doing something different with my own kids. Like, am I as present as I need to be? I as loving as I need to be? Am I as restorative as I need to be? Am I fear based or am I love based? And
mm,
so that was a turning point for me. And I'm so happy that I went through that. And I'm so happy that I'm still now able to reflect on that. And I'm happy to share that at conferences, but even more than just conferences, I share that in conversations I have with parents every day.
mm,
When I
mhm,
see parents who are really struggling and I see parents, I have to be vulnerable and put myself out there and say, hey, I see you. You sound like what I sounded like maybe 10 years ago, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
that's okay. And I want them to know that there is a different way. I don't want to use the word better, but there's a
mhm,
different way. Yes, do I feel it's better? Yeah, but I don't want to be condescending. So I feel like there's a different way to parent. I feel like there's a different way to be in relationship with your kids that's going to bring about something that's greater, something that's better.
mm,
And so I think just the quality time, obviously, just the active listening, being a truly present and truly participatory in what's happening at home. And so now I'm in a situation, I'm divorced. And so like I have my kids every other weekend. And so like I'm really thinking about my time with them and being more present. And so like I had my daughter last night. So I'm saying like, hey, what do you want to do this weekend? And so we had a pumpkin patch at school the other day, actually. And so yesterday. And so I said, hey, let's decorate. So she's excited about these pumpkins coming home. And she already told me the character she wants to, we're going to turn this on its side. And we're going to turn this into an elephant. That's what she wants to do. And so,
I want to see it on Facebook. Okay.
okay, I'll work on
You're
that.
looking for it.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just, I mean, I think that's the piece that as leaders, sometimes we forget.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that I know I was guilty of as a leader was always telling my staff, family first, family first, family first, but I wasn't putting my family
Mhm.
first.
It's interesting because I can relate to a lot of what you said, and I can relate to the pressure of being a dad, the pressure of feeling like you need to provide, you need to make more money, you need to do this, and there's a lot of pressure. But I'll say, in my experience, um, since I began this work, and you've been doing it far longer than I have, but um, I feel like the work has made me a better person, if that makes sense.
Oh, for
The
sure.
more that I've learned, the more empathy that I have, the more that I've learned about better ways to, work with people. And it's funny, as I've been exposed to different work over the years, I remember my son at one point, you know, we were doing all we could to, really move. I have this big belief that if we can do better, we should do better, right? So it's always about that. And I remember, when I got introduced to the work of Ross Green, and I was really excited about it, and trying to pivot my own, parenting and approach. And of course, kids get wise to you, and Cooper caught on to the fact that I was Ross Greening him, as he would say. And then he would do it back to me like, Dad, I see you're having a difficult time. What's up? So, but that's the whole thing. It's a journey, and we've got to learn along the journey. We've got to realize that, that if we can do better, we've got to keep focusing in that direction. So I appreciate that. And the one thing I got to appreciate in the event that you were recently at is I got to see a beautiful picture of your kids who are beautiful. And, I appreciate you sharing that story. And I know it's tough. It's tough to, share these journeys. And, I think about the things that I've learned along the way. And sometimes you look back and you're like, if I'd known then what I know now, but there are a lot of people out there that sometimes are resistant to change. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for people that are able to kind of, make that journey and learn as we go and reflect and all of that. So let's get back to kind of being trauma informed.
Okay.
And, you mentioned back, I think you said 2016, but, there was a point not long ago where trauma informed wasn't really a well-known kind of idea. And now, of course, it's everywhere. And that's a blessing and a curse,
Mhm.
because you want to see these things like trauma informed practices spreading. But at the same time, we know that there are a lot of things happening out there under the umbrella of trauma informed that aren't really doing what they need to do. I've kind of said for a long time, and I think you'll agree that, you don't do a half day training on trauma informed practices and become trauma informed. It's really about changing the fabric of the system or the organization, right? It's about making sure that you're trauma informed, not just for the kids, but also for the teachers and staff. And you've shared some of your background with that as well. But for people that aren't as familiar, tell me, kind of in your words and experience, I mean, what is a trauma informed approach, and what does it mean for a school?
Yeah, it's definitely that love and compassion base, but I also feel like I try to simplify this, and I know the work we can get into all the details, like I said, but I try to simplify it and say it is living in a space of empathy where I can offer grace to others. It is treating others with that dignity and respect that I would hope they would treat me with. And so we talk about the golden rule, it talks about treating others the way you want to be treated. And then there's the platinum rule where it says treat others the way they deserve to be treated. And I think it's encompassing of all those things. And I think it starts with the understanding that for a long time in education, we haven't done that. For a
Mhm.
long time in education, we've separated ourselves from our students, and we have this different set of rules and expectations for them than we would accept from our supervisor. And I'll take it a step further. I think it's just not just a separate set of rules and expectations, it's just like a separate level of respect. Like we respect you, but we respect you from a distance, or we respect you, but we're going to respect you differently because you're a child. And I think for me, getting to that point of truly being trauma informed means like respect is respect. And I tell people all the time, one of the things that drives me crazy is hearing any adult, especially, I shouldn't say any adult, hearing any educator say that kid has to earn my respect. I disagree with that. I think we get into this work, and when you do this work well, it's offering respect to every student every single day, regardless of the behaviors. And I think we talk about unconditional love quite a bit, but I think it's unconditional respect as well. My
Mhm.
respect of you is not based on your actions. My respect of you is not based on you complimenting me or the gifts that you give me.
Right,
As
right.
an educator who has the privilege every single day to work with kids, and I tell kids all the time, do they frustrate me? Yes, there's times I'm very frustrated. Are there times that I need to pause and walk away and reflect on what's happening before I say something that I shouldn't say? Yes, definitely. I'm human. Like all those things exist. But at the end of the day, my respect for you remains the same. I still respect you. And I think what we have to do is understand that we still work with kids. And just like adults, kids aren't perfect. Kids are far from perfect. And we have to accept that every single day when I come to school. But when I'm here, I want my kids to know that I love them unconditionally. I respect them unconditionally. And my biggest job, more than anything academic, is making sure they're safe, they're loved, they're valued, they're appreciated. That's my job. That's what I look at when I come to work every single day.
Mhm. And of course, if a kid doesn't feel safe, a kid can't learn. If a teacher doesn't feel safe, a teacher's not going to be able to effectively teach, right?
Yeah,
So I think that's so important. But I think there's a lot of kids out there that are in schools where they don't necessarily feel connected to anyone, and I think that those children are at such a great risk. And I think there's often that idea that. Um, that kids, people look at kids as, I mean, sometimes less than human. It's almost like you're not a fully, and I think about that in terms of respect.
yeah,
We do things to children that we would never do to adults. I mean, I think about things like restraint and seclusion.
yeah.
If you and I were in a meeting and you got dysregulated, I wouldn't drag you off to a seclusion room.
Right.
Yet somehow that becomes practice in schools where it's like, how do you justify doing something like that?
Yeah.
It's a tough journey for kind of moving from that compliance mindset
Mhm.
where, I mean, kids are sometimes treated like inmates, versus that relationship family, type of,
Mhm.
arrangement where people feel valued,
Yeah.
people feel loved. Let me hit a couple of comments here real quick and we'll come back. Let's see. I have somebody joining us, another person joining us from Canada here. Chantel, who was at the event on Friday, the event we held, said that she received all return I love you messages from family as a result of your task. We won't tell people what that was, but James had a special exercise for us during the presentation. Let's see. Chantel said, I also wanted to mention being from Canada. It's so very sad that so many received a response of was where they're shooting at your school. That means every person in the United States of America is walking into a school from a certain form of trauma just from that. And yeah, it is. I mean, that is a little unnerving when the response to "I love you" is "What's wrong?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Sandy has a question for you. Sandy said, I was just talking to a group of coaches and trainers about how to address the disconnect when parents are not used to trauma informed practices. Can you explain more about how to navigate cultural differences as well as generational trauma, particularly in communities of color?
Yeah. So I'll tackle that. I think as with anything, like you just said, students don't learn until they feel safe, right? And so I think that goes for all people, right? If I don't feel connection, if I don't feel safety from you, I'm not likely to hear or respect or whatever the word you want to throw in there, the things that you're saying. And so I think when we're making this shift with our parents, because we have to make that shift as well, I think before we can tell somebody to shift or change something that they're doing, we have to first have a connection and relationship with them first. And so I'm in year 3 of a school that I'm in now. And I can tell you right now, I've never used the verbiage trauma informed with a parent.
Hmm.
And it's not because I don't believe in the work. I think it's just we're still in the process of making sure that our families know that we love their children unconditionally. And
Hmm.
so, and now in year 3, like it's, year 1, they're feeling you out. They're trying to understand. Year 2, you're gaining traction. Year 3, I feel now, especially with some of the conversations and interactions I've had with parents recently over some really hard stuff. I
Mhm.
feel guards are down. I feel like they're understanding and they genuinely know that we love their kids. And that
Mhm.
not that we just love their kids, that we love them as well. That we are working to change the perception of this school and this community, that this is a school that loves all people in
Mhm.
this community. We certainly love kids, but we know that their kids come to us as a product or a result of the family dynamic as well. And so we love the grown-ups in their life just as much as we love the kids in their life. And so I think it's important that we continually pour into the adults and the grown-ups in their life as well, just as much as we pour into the kids. And so I think until you take that foundational step, and so for those of you that were at the conference last week, I'm going to repeat something that I talked about. When you're looking to make a dynamic change like this from traditional discipline, traditional school to this redesigned trauma informed school, in my opinion, there's some steps you have to go through. And the first step is connecting with people's hearts. You have to do the heart work to get to the hard work. I've heard people say that. You have to do the heart work to get to the hard work. And if I don't connect with your heart first and get you to understand, like I'm one that, as I look at some of the parents in my building, I'm having conversations with them where I'm bringing up and talking to them about my kids and the similarities between their kids and my kids, or the situations they're dealing with their kids and the situations I've dealt with my kids, or relationships or things like that. So when I do the heart work, then we can slowly work on shifting mindsets. That's the next thing that
Mhm.
has to change, and getting them to understand that I know that your school looked like this. I know that this is what traditional school looks like. I know that that's what you're familiar with. But let's talk about what school could be, or how
Mhm.
our interactions might be, or how we love kids unconditionally. That's different than what you're used to. And then after we can work on shifting those mindsets, then we can get to like systems and processes. What are
Mhm.
we doing here that might be different? Why are we doing this? And do we have the people in the right in the right place at the right time to make this thing work? And then we can get to the application. So just like I feel like some schools try to make this jump too quickly, like there's a
Mhm.
lot of schools that I go to, I say heart, mindset, systems, processes, application. There's lots of schools that I go to, they want to jump to the application right
Right.
away because they
Right.
want they
Right.
want the change overnight. But if
That's
you
right.
it's never going to work, it's never going to be successful. And so I think that also go extends to what we do with our families as we're trying to get them to understand that there's a better way. I think we still have to go through the same process, connect with their heart, then shift mindsets, systems and processes and applications. So I
Mhm.
think even though we want the work to happen overnight, we understand it's not going to happen overnight. So I
That's
think to answer your questions, whether it's people of color or not, I will say that we have to do the hard work to get to the hard work. And
Mhm.
when we talk specifically about people of color, one of the things that I know, obviously firsthand, but also in interactions, is we're in a mental health crisis, right?
Mhm.
Across the country. And so, as we're in this mental health crisis across the country, when we're dealing with not all people of color, but lots of people of color, there is a stigma around mental health. There is a stigma around social work and counseling and all of those things. And so, again, you can never expect to approach somebody you don't have a relationship and no connection with and suggest that, hey, I think you should go to therapy. That's that's never going to go over well for you. Are you willing to
No,
take the
no,
time
no.
to get to those? You
Right.
know what I mean? So
Right, right. Yeah, there's a lot that you said there that really gets you thinking. One of the really important things, and I heard this, from probably our mutual friend and colleague, thinking about Matthew Portell and the work that he's done. Where both Matthew and you come from the same place of trauma informed approaches are not just some um, interventions or strategies we use on kids.
yeah,
It's actually a change in mindset and approach that we're using not just with the kids, but with the families, with the staff, with everyone that's part of the environment, right? And I remember Matthew, sharing some stories about kind of working with parents, and unfortunately, in many schools across the country, and you have probably seen this. Parents are sometimes viewed as the enemy, the bad guy, the people that are, and you even hear things about, well, this kid has such a bad home life that there's nothing I can do about it. How do you respond to kind of the skepticism that might be out there sometimes in terms of, getting people, even the teachers and staff, to kind of change mindset and to be trauma informed in what they're doing? Because it's very easy for us to look at our past experiences and think, gee, these parents haven't worked with me, or, or from the parents' perspective, as a child, with a disability who's had an IEP, I can relate to this well, and you probably can as well. the idea that if you go to an IEP meeting, all you hear are these bad things about your child.
Yeah.
There's nothing more traumatizing as a parent than to sit in an IEP meeting with six other parents or six professionals and hearing nothing but bad things. And that's some trauma as well. So how have you helped to make this shift in, your staff, both in terms of being trauma informed for the kids, but also with the families?
I think it's the approach to the work, and I might have shared this last week. I'm not sure, but I'll be really vulnerable about the work that I've done in 2 schools now, and so I think where I faltered definitely in the first school was think about when you go to a conference. I don't care if you're a teacher, a principal, a superintendent. You go to a conference, you hear something that's like groundbreaking and like it makes complete sense to you, and you're like, yes, that's what we need to be doing.
Right.
There's those times when we go back and we like mandate, do this, do this, do this, do this, right? And so we get into the situation where we're doing stuff to our staff, and if you're doing stuff to somebody, they're never going to receive it well. Like nobody enjoys, especially when we talk about teachers. Teachers, one of the things they hate the most when a decision is made without their input, right? And so as I'm doing something to you, that never feels right, and you're never going to find 100% success in that. And so I think I definitely was that person who went to this conference. I heard Jim speak. I saw it made complete sense to me. It clicked. But you also have to take into account my experiences as an educator were different than some of the people that I work with.
Right.
And so it didn't click with them right away. And so then because I understood the need for this change, I think the next phase I went through was I was doing stuff for them. Like I was almost like I was permissive. Like, this is what we need to be doing. They're not doing it. So I'm just going to do it for them because I want it to benefit kids. And yeah, it's great. It's benefiting kids, but like the adults don't really feel it and understand it. And so where I am now is I don't want to do things to them. I want to do things for them. I want to do things with them. And so if I give you an example of something that happened this year, like we just went through, here's a guest for you. If you have never had Jessica Harris on, you need to have Jessica Harris on. She's in Indiana. So there was a podcast that she did recently with some folks that I know about different call out systems. And as we began our year, we had to accept some things about some traditional practices that we still had in place that we weren't thrilled with, that we were seeing weren't working that great. And so we wanted to come up with something different. And so it wasn't a situation where I listened to this podcast and several staff members listened to this podcast and they knew this is gold. We need to be doing this. And we could have just said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're all doing this. But instead, we went about it as, let's get into some groups. Let's listen to this podcast. I think there's some value in this. I want you to give me your feedback. Do we like this? Do we not like this? If we like it, do we want to take it on full throttle, or do we need to change some things or make some adjustments to make it work for us? And so we had some incredible conversations, both in small group and in whole groups. So we got to the point where we implemented something. And in that situation, we did it with our staff. They didn't feel like it was forced upon them. We weren't doing it for them. It was a with situation, and we're finding so much success in that. And so I think when we can get to that point, and it goes right back to heart, mindset, systems, processes, and application. When I connect with people's hearts, that allows me to do things with them. If I'm not connecting with people's hearts, I'm going to do things to them. And so if you can get to that area or that work of the with is where that brilliance and that magic happens.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And so it was doing things to, doing things for, and then moving into doing things with. I love that. I think that's so important in so many different areas. Not just whether it's a matter of bringing practices in, but even when we're working with people. I think about, we have a tremendous audience of self-advocates. And you look at the disability community, and very often things are being done to people, or things are being done for people, but not with them. And it reminds me of that kind of idea of, nothing to us, without us, kind of a thing, that we have to work with people. So I do have to call out here. We have a very special viewer here today. Looks like our friend Joe Brummer is on, and he said, just happy I get to know and learn from you. Hope to see you in Houston. Are you going to be in Houston for the?
I will be in Houston. I'm excited to see you in Houston. I will be there.
Good. And by the way, Houston is the Attachment and Trauma Network conference, and that's coming up in, is it March or February?
It's February. President's Day weekend in February.
Okay, great. And I'll be there as well, so good to see you. Joe also said, love Jessica Harris. And by the way, I did write down her name quickly while you said that. So great to see that. Great to see you here, Joe, as well. So, I love what you were saying, again, about that ideology. So last week you presented for the event, and the name of your session was "What's Love Got to Do with It?" Everything. I think I got that right or close. Um,
You're right there.
okay. Um, and certainly the message resonated with me as a father. Like I want people that are going to care about my kid. There were many years that I felt like, here I saw this kid that was so amazing to me in so many ways. But when other people don't see the same child you see, it's tough. And, I think sometimes when kids are in these very punitive cultures, what comes out is not the best of a child. What comes out is they don't feel safe. Not feeling safe, they have stress behaviors. They begin to get looked at for their behaviors. They're not being kind of connected with. They're having things done to them, and it's heartbreaking. But tell me a little bit about kind of this presentation that you gave, and kind of the theme of. And I know you've already mentioned a little bit about the importance of love, but if you were to put this in a quick synopsis, how would you kind of say that in terms of what's love got to do with it?
I think I'll start with this. I hear people ask the question a lot about how kids, or make the statement, I should say, kids have changed, kids have changed, kids have changed. And I think I'm not so quick to accept that. I don't know that kids have just, I don't know that kids have just changed the change. I feel like what's happened is our responses and our interactions with kids have changed. And because that's changed, we kind of, the product of that is that it looks like a different type of kid, I guess. And I feel like one of the things that's changed the most is the time we invest in kids, the time that parents invest in kids, the time that, or any grownups in their life, the time that communities invest in kids, the time that educators invest in kids. I feel like everybody is so busy at this point that we don't have the same amount of time to invest in our kids, which is our future, as maybe we once did. And so I think what I'm asking for when I talk about that love, it's just like getting back to our first love. Our first love at one point used to be our youth. Our first love at one point used to be our kids. Our first love at one point used to be, just nurturing and wrapping our love and our support around kids. And I feel like at this point, our first love is money, and our first love is fame. Our first love is just being in the limelight. So we've kind of lost focus. And so when I'm talking about love, I feel like I want us to revert back to doing a better job of loving people, caring about people, being compassionate towards people, and then expressing it in a meaningful way. And so as I look in my office and the things that we have, and I'll turn my camera just for a second, just so you can kind of see it. These are things that are important to me. Obviously, my family is important to me right here, and my girls are right there. But these are some of those core values and those things that we stand for as a school. And one of the things we do every single day is we do this safekeeper statement, and it's a call and response type thing that happens on the intercom every single day, where staff join me and we say to our kids, "I will keep you safe." And our kids respond back with, "I will help you keep us safe." And then we say, "I will help you learn. I will help you help us learn." But that last phrase, and this is something that I've been saying for a long time, "I love you. There's nothing you can do about it." Like, I need our kids to hear that every single day and believe that and feel that. And then at the same time, if you know Rita Pearson, this is our daily affirmation pledge. It comes directly from her. And so every single day I'll say in the announcements, what I love about this school is that teachers and staff, they believe such affirmative and positive things about you. We want you to believe these things about yourself. And so as we say these words together, I want you to get to a point where it's not just rhetoric, it's not just words, it's just who you are and what you believe. I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful. I am strong. I deserve the education I get when I'm here. That's what I want every one of our kids to truly, truly believe and understand. And I want it to be in action. And one of the other things, I'll take you here just for a second. So, like, this has been something that we've spent.
I love this tour, by the way. This is fantastic.
I'm gonna give it a tour. So, as I look at this is that difference. And when we talk about love, I think it's important that we understand that everybody needs love differently, right? And I think there's no universal love button. There's no universal, I can do this and it's going to be accepted by everybody and they're going to feel my love and they're going to know that I'm loved. And so we spent so much time this year talking about the difference between each and every, and how in education, we know that we tend to focus on the every. we tend to focus on like, I'm going to do this for everybody. I'm throwing paint on the wall and I hope it sticks, right? And all too often we've done that because it's easier. And so we have to make a decision. Do we want to continue to do what's easier or do what's right? And I think we know the answer should be we want to do what's right, but we have to also accept doing what's right takes more work. And doing what's right is moving from every to each, and each is very individualized. And that can encompass anything. That can encompass what we do academically, that encompasses what we do behaviorally, that encompasses what we do social emotionally, but it encompasses that word love as well. How does each student who walks in my building every single day, how does each one of them need to be loved? How do they need to be shown value? How do they need to be shown appreciation? That's so important. And so when I look at that, and if you didn't catch it, like there's $1 bill that's pretty balled up and it's ragged and it's torn and it's ripped, and there's one that's pretty pristine. And this came from, I can't think his name. His last name is like, I think Bridges, but I watched this YouTube video years ago. And his name's in my presentation because I always want to give him credit because this is phenomenal. He talks about, he starts with $2 bills that are pristine and they're pure. And he asks the crowd, like, how much is this one worth? They say $1. How much is this one worth? They say $1. And then he crumples that one up and he says, how much is this worth? And they say, well, $1. He says, well, how much is this one worth? $1. And he spits on it. He tears, he does all this stuff. But at the end, they're still worth the same. But then his analogy, it's brilliant. He says, okay, now let's pretend that the Coke machine is the university or the trade school, or whatever that they want to go to. Like, which one of these is going to go in easier? Well, one of them is definitely going to go in easier. It's going to be accepted because it has, a greater opportunity to go. But this other one over here, it takes a different type of love, a different type of intervention, a different type of whatever to get that one prepared to make it into the university. But because they have the same value and the same worth, they should have the same opportunity. But we don't always do that with our kids that we work with. And we have to get to that point of accepting that some of them need something more. Some of them need something extra. They need that each type of love, not the every type of love. And so that's what I want educators to accept. And so every classroom in my building, they have that up there. They have the first day of school, they came with $2 bills. I said, bring them. And we're gonna attach it to this paper. And like around it, there's things like equity written up there, or just, we talk a lot about what it means to be trauma informed, but a lot of times we talk about the other dollar too, because just because that $1 is pristine doesn't mean that it hasn't been through stuff, right? And so it needs something as well. And so when I think about love, like that's it. I want every kid to feel and hear and know that they're loved every single day. But it goes beyond the kids, because the same thing should apply to staff. The same thing should apply to community members, our everything, the environment that we've created here. That's what we're trying to do.
I love it. I love what you're doing. I kept thinking to myself, I want to call in and join you for your daily morning affirmations. They need to come out there. What a great way to start your day. I have a question for you, kind of related to, part of the focus that we have here at the Alliance. Thinking about your journey, thinking about the work to become kind of a, trauma responsive, school. Has that had a positive effect on, kind of the punitive discipline, and whether it be suspension or expulsion or restraint, seclusion, or any of that, have you, through the work that you've done, have you been able to have a measurable impact in terms of things that may have been being done, prior to starting this work?
Yeah, so I think in this work, I've kind of come up with, I want to write a book at someday, and this is kind of it. I've come up with these 10 trauma-informed mindsets that for an organization or a school to truly be trauma-informed. These are 10 things that an organization has to accept and really work under the umbrella of. And number 10 actually talks about punishment and really getting people to understand that there is a distinct difference between a punishment and a consequence. Those are very different things. And so I feel strongly that there's no place for punishment in school. Punishment is harsh. Punishment is punitive. And I think more than anything, punishment breaks apart relationship. Punishment causes disconnect. So if I have somebody who is being harsh towards me and punitive towards me and hurting me, likely I'm going to not want to be connected to them. I want disconnect. I want to be away from them. But I also say, and if you've ever heard me speak, there's 3 things that every organization has to be successful. They have to have accountability, structure, and consequences. There is a distinct difference between a consequence and a punishment. A consequence is something that's done restoratively. A consequence is something that's done to maintain relationship, but it's meant to teach or reteach a skill. And we know we can get into Ross Green, Bruce Perry about lagging skills and all that, but that's the meaning of a consequence, to really teach or reteach a skill while maintaining dignity and maintaining respect. And so my view on this, when it comes to, suspension and all those things, I think it's all about, for us, we're not in the habit of just sending a kid home. That's never the goal, right? But we have to, as we have that conversation about each and every, we've gotten much better about, we know our kids who need individualized plans. We know that. And we've hopefully come to the table to create these plans that are going to allow them to be successful. But at the same time, we have to admit that we don't always get it right the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do get into situations as a staff or as a school where we have this plan and we're doing everything we can to invest into this plan to help this kid be successful. And there have been some times when a student is harming themselves or harming others, and the conversation is not, get out, I don't want you here. The conversation with the parent and with the student is, we have this plan. We need to go back to the drawing board on this plan.
Right.
So as we're back on the drawing board, maybe we're putting you in ISS and we're supporting you there. But the intent's not just to not have you present. The intent is, let's recuperate. Let's figure this out. We need to do something different. We need to sit down and come up with a plan. And then we're going to invite the parent back in to say, this is what we've come up with. This is what we're going to try moving forward. So it's not a punitive, we don't want you here. It's we need time to regroup, because what we have right now, or the plan we have in place isn't sufficient. It's not adequate for your level of need.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think some of it's a reframing and just understanding the purpose and the intent of what we're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're also, in our district that we're in, we have what's called like an alternative learning placement, because I'm sure this is how it is other places, but the elementary level, ISS typically means they're in here with me, right? And so we don't have a person assigned to that. But as a district, we have a place that they can go for that ISS. And one of the things, us as a school, that I feel very strongly about, if we're ever sending a kid there so we have time to regroup, the last thing we want is for them not to have connection. So as we're sitting down and we're saying, hey, this student, we're gonna send you there for a day or two as we figure this out, we're also mapping out who's going over to visit you, so you still have connection to this space and you're not just feeling like we've isolated you and we've forgotten about you. And so as I listened to that principal call us back, he's like, man, I really like the way that you guys always make sure somebody's here connecting and checking in. That's important to us. That's really important to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you were talking, Joe Brummer, who was commenting earlier, came into my mind, and I was thinking about the work that he does around trauma-informed restorative approaches.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Joe said that really stuck in my mind and just has not left is this idea that accountability should feel good. That when harm is done, when it comes to kind of being accountable for what happened, it's a matter of understanding kind of what the harm was and doing things to restore it. So certainly, far better approaches that can be taken in terms of, helping people to connect that. Now, I know I promised to have you out of here within an hour, and we're just about at that time. In fact, we're a little bit over. I have one final question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So the final question comes from Jamie Emberson, who is a colleague in the UK, as I recall. And Jamie said, I love and respect your words about heart work and shifting mindsets and creating meaningful relationships as the path to change policy and practice. Beautiful and wonderful. We are all in this together. It's an investment. I'd be interested to know how you manage and influence compassion at a systemic level. Thanks.
So I'm assuming she means like beyond just like our building. Is that what you think she's asking? Like just
I would imagine, I guess you can look at different levels as being systemic, but I think at the school level could be a systemic level, at the district level could be a systemic level. I guess it's beyond you in the classroom, but kind of that that larger higher level change. And of course, as we've talked about your journey, I think your journey's heading in that direction as well, especially as you think about kind of going into, a position as a superintendent. But, it can be hard. Systems are resistant to change. So, what's your advice for somebody trying to change a system?
I think it kind of goes back to what you just shared about Joe, that accountability shouldn't be a gotcha moment. Accountability in itself should be systematic, and accountability should be frequent, and it should be consistent. And so one of the things that we all feel strongly about, anybody who does consulting work, is that I'll go in and I'll present to a school and I might be there for 3 hours, I might be for the entire day, but if there's no follow-up, if there's no action steps, if there's no plan, it's kind of for naught. Like, because we know that as people, we generally revert back to what we know and what we're comfortable in. Change is uncomfortable. It's living it outside your comfort zone. That's hard. And so I think part of what she's asking, or my response to what she's saying, is what's the accountability like when the change is implemented? So like we're moving in this direction. And that accountability, sometimes that's me as the leader saying, how can I continue to support you? How do you feel about this work? What do you need for us to continue moving forward in this work? And
Mhm.
so as I go consult, like one of the things I say that I always want to do, I never want to just go and leave. I go and I'm saying like now, and part of what the work we do when I'm there is, what are your action steps? What's next? What are you going to do next? And I always schedule some type of follow-up Zoom so I can check back in to see, where are you in this work? What are you continuing to do? What's your plan moving forward? And I'll often jump on 4 or 5 of those calls just to make sure that people are being held accountable in a positive and a compassionate way to what they to the change that they want. And that's the whole reason they brought me there to begin with. So systematically or systemically within your building, like that accountability piece and what's the structure to that. So like for us, we're really big about, we have a behavior screen. I know that's, people feel great about that. Some people don't. It's just a tool. It's a foundational thing for us. What's more important to me is, what do we do with that? And so as we look at our kids who this either teacher observation or student input or parent input or what the screener says who needs support, we're sitting down and we're coming up with individualized plans for all those kids. That's
Mhm.
great that we take the time to do that. But even systemically, what's the accountability like of that? How
Mhm.
often are we coming back and saying, this is what we said, how is this going? Do we need to change something? Do we need to add something? Do we leave it because this is just right? So I think my biggest response to what you're saying is, what's the accountability look like? And like Joe says, and like Guy just mentioned, that accountability shouldn't hurt. That accountability should feel good,
Right.
because really, as I'm holding your hand and doing it with you, kind of full circle, as I'm doing it with you, that accountability is us just ensuring that we're doing right by kids and loving kids the way they need to be loved.
Beautiful point, and beautiful point for us to kind of wrap up on as well. I think that that really encompasses, what you're sharing with us today. I want to thank you. It's been really a great opportunity to have you present recently at the event, to
Yeah.
have you join us for this. I know we quickly met in Houston last year, but I hope to have a chance to bend your ear a little bit more this year.
Well, for sure.
It's been great to hear about your work and what you're doing. Really inspiring. Love your journey. Love your just vulnerability and honesty in terms of your own journey around all this. You're really inspiring, and I really appreciate all that you're doing. And if I ever find myself in Kansas, I'm going to come in for that
Please do.
morning affirmation. It's great work, and I'm sure it's making a big difference for kids and their families.
Yeah.
And that's what this work's all about. So thank you so much. We had some nice thank yous here as well, Jamie, who's you had responded to, and Chantel and others are weighing in here and thanking you for your work. So I will let you go, but thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll look forward to seeing you in Houston, if not somewhere else before.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You take care.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye. So I do have a couple announcements for everyone else, and let James go because I had promised him about an hour. We went a little bit over, but I think he'll forgive me. Let me share a few things with everyone while you're still here. I want to let you know about our next event. So in 2 weeks, we have with us Michael McKnight. And Michael has actually written several books with Laurie DeSattel's. Does some amazing work. He does a lot of training work as well, involved with LSCI and other things like that. I had an opportunity earlier this year to go to New Jersey and spend a week with Michael, attending a training that he was conducting. So really looking forward to that. I think some fantastic information there. A couple other things I just wanted to mention real quickly, and let me see if I can share these here. We talked about earlier the creating trauma sensitive schools conference. That's an event that's happening in Houston. So that was the event that we talked about. Looks like February 19th through the 21st. Lots of great information. It's on the Attachment and Trauma Network website. It looks like James will be presenting there. I'll be presenting there. They've got a lot of amazing people that are going to be presenting at that event as well. Do want to let you know also, if you missed our special event recently, we do have, in fact, it's on the Trauma Network website, I believe, in the store. They have some of the videos that were from the event that you can actually now download and view. and I don't know where I'm going to find those here. E-learning, perhaps, but we'll find those. So from the recent event, they have some of the presentations were done, and you can purchase those individually, or you can purchase a package. So let you know that that's there as well. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Great to see your names out there, and great to know you're there and part of this conversation. We'll keep doing this work and hoping for better results, better, safer schools, and all the things that we can do to make a difference. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you again in about